Okay, so we completed Perek Yud Beis and Perek Yud Gimel, and these two prakim both talked about how a person could be an Oved, so he's davening in a real deeper way of davening, that the davening is working on himself, on developing proper uh, emotion for Hashem. The only thing is there's two kinds of avodas, even though in general, I mean, to be more specific, there are many different details, but in general, there are two general categories of avodah. One that is davening is mainly experiencing feelings of simcha, and the other one where the davening mainly makes him feel humbled and merirus. And the difference is what is the focus, what the person is focusing on. Is the purpose focusing on the greatness of Hashem and understand how Hashem is infinite, how much is beyond our comprehension. And these are the kind of thoughts that make a person feel excited about the greatness of Hashem and excited that I have a relationship with Hashem. Or the thoughts are more about how my avodah is lacking and how I want to improve my avodah, also different levels. And that is feeling that a person experiences, he's humbled by those feelings, or he feels merirus himself, he wants to get out of the situation and get closer. Now, he's going to explain that even though these are people that are really working on themselves and they're davening in a deep, pneumistic way, in an internal way, nevertheless, we have to be cautious that it should not be motivated, or at least there shouldn't be there shouldn't be sort of beneath the surface yeshus that's behind it. So let's look inside. So we are in lessons in Yecholzu, page 107, and we're starting with the first paragraph. We're reading with the bottom part, which is the Hebrew, the English. A person who is davening in the either one of the two above mentioned approaches of Avodah, it's still possible. It's possible that beneath the surface there's yeshus and there's coarseness, which means the person is not in doing it with the purest of intention. Again, we can say halavai that everybody would daven the way these two people were describing their davening. So this is all on a deeper, subtle, more perfecting things. But from this we can apply the principle to everything. For example, the first approach, person davens with simcha. When a person is in a mode of simcha and a mode of love for Hashem, certainly there's a feeling of yeshus. Like it says in Tanya, yesh mi she'oyev. When a person feels love, there's an expression in Tanya, yes, there's someone there that's loving. In other words, generally speaking, especially the feeling of love, it means that I'm enjoying the fact that I love this person. It gives me pleasure. So there's a me involved here. Yesh mi she'oyev, there's someone who has that love. So it's not a feeling that totally I lose my identity and I just lose myself to Hashem. On the contrary, there's a certain feeling of me. By the way, all midas, all emotional character traits, thank you, all emotional character traits, they're all based on a certain sense of self, whether it's anger, whether it's love, whether it's the other midas of the Rachmanas. A midah, by definition, means how I feel about something else outside of myself. How does it affect me? It's one of the differences between intellect and emotion. Intellect, in essence, is something which is more objective. That's why people could think about things intellectually. It doesn't necessarily move them, because intellect is about understanding something, and it's not about my reaction or how I feel. It's just pure logic about a certain subject. So you can have a person who studies intellectually all the different things there is to study about Hashem, about the greatness of Hashem, and it doesn't necessarily to love Hashem, to fear Hashem, to want to be connected to Hashem, because they're not thinking about it on that level. They're just thinking about it as a pure academic subject. So something which is pure academic is sort of outside of, doesn't, it's not about me, it's about the subject. But midos is all about me. When you talk about an emotional reaction to something, by definition, what does that mean? How it affects me. So therefore, when a person's in this mode of love or the mode of simcha, he still is very much aware and conscious of self. He has simcha v'hispilus, joy and excitement. It's something which he feels sort of his own self in that emotion. And the same as with love. It still will fulfill his desire to cling on to Hashem. In other words, like I said before, love, there's a certain aspect of self there that I love Hashem and it gives me pleasure. One of the things which we learned in Tanya recently in Rechitas is chapter 41. Remember, we mentioned it in this mimer, that chapter 41 and chapter 42, those are the two chapters of Kabbalah Soil. And what is it saying, that chapter in Tanya? That love and fear of Hashem are compared to two wings. Just like a bird flies with two wings, so too our mitzvahs that fly up to Hashem, figuratively speaking, but in order to fly up to Hashem, it needs two wings, which means if I do mitzvah without any emotion, I did the mitzvah, but it doesn't fly. In other words, it doesn't really create an open, conscious relationship with Hashem. But when I do it with emotion, what's the emotion? Love and fear. These are the two emotions. So what is fear? We explained many times, fear doesn't really mean afraid of punishment. That's really the lowest level. When Alter Rebbe talks about fear in Tanya, it's more a feeling of awe and respect for Hashem, where I'm awed by Hashem, I respect Hashem, I'm humbled by Hashem's greatness. And love is where I'm drawn towards Hashem. So what it says in Perek Mem Aleph is that just like a bird can't fly with one wing, that's how our mitzvahs also can't fly just with one wing. And love for Hashem, as great as it is not enough. You also need yira, fear of Hashem. And one of the ways that's explained is what we just said a moment ago, that love involves me. It's my pleasure. And therefore, when I love Hashem, being that it's about me enjoying the pleasure of loving Hashem, just like a person enjoys the pleasure of loving someone else. So therefore, that me part could sometimes interfere, that instead of doing that which is really giving pleasure to the one that I love, I'm doing things that gives pleasure to me. Like in a relationship, sometimes there's a situation where a person does things that the other party is actually not happy with. Even though in their mind they're saying they're doing it because they love them and therefore they're doing A, B, and C, but the things they choose to do are the things that give them more pleasure than it gives the other person more pleasure. So therefore, if it's based on fear of Hashem, and respect for Hashem, which means I won't go against Hashem's words. In some way, that will guide that my love will go in the right direction. I think I told you once the story. It's like a mushal, but it's a story about there were fish in the sea, and one of the fish was swimming back and forth and pacing, panicking, and the other fish say, "What are you panicking about?" He said, "Don't you realize soon the fishermen are going to come, and they're going to catch us in their nets, and they're going to take us, and that'll be the end of our life." And as they're speaking, suddenly the nets fall on their heads, and there it is. The fishermen chop them, pull them up on the boat, and now the fish is really panicking. But then he hears them talking about the king. Oh, this is not just an ordinary boat. They're actually bringing fish to the king. And he hear them saying that the king loves fish. Oh, Baruch Hashem, he loves fish. So I'm going to really, probably is going to make a big little aquarium in front of the palace and put this fish in there. Anyway, the story goes that instead of going upstairs in the front of the palace, they seem to be going to the kitchen for some strange reason. And then in the kitchen, it seemed to be put on top of a counter for some strange reason. And then they see the guy taking out a knife, and the fish screams out, "The king doesn't love fish. The king loves himself, not fish." I mean, so when people say they love animals, and they protect animals, that means they love the animals. And even they love chicken, and therefore they eat chicken, that doesn't mean that they love themselves. So therefore, when we love Hashem, are we loving Hashem or am I loving myself? Of course I'm loving Hashem, but what was definitely involved is love for myself. And sometimes that love for myself could sort of subconsciously override the love for Hashem, and I do more what gives me pleasure than what gives Hashem really pleasure. So we need to have that bittul, or the yira, which is going to ensure that my love to Hashem will go in the right direction. So that's what he's saying here, that love for Hashem, or even simcha of Hashem, these are feelings that could involve self and yeshus. Shemur Magmachas is explained elsewhere. And he adds in parentheses, we need to find eitzes, devise certain, has to get advice and guidance. How could a person have simcha and ava, and yet at the same time there should be bittul? In fact, this is the deeper meaning of Aaron, the Kohen Gadol, that he lit the candles of the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. The menorah was made up of 7 branches. What's the 7 branches? These are the midos. One is Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. It's also explained that a candle represents the neshama, based on the pasuk, Neir Hashem, the candle of Hashem, Nishmas Adam is the soul of man. And that's why we always light a candle. If it's in memory of someone who passed away, we light a candle. The yard site, that's also the reason why we have candles by a chuppah, because the souls of ancestors come to the chuppah to bless the chosin and the kala, and therefore we hold the candles. So the 7 candles represent the whole Jewish nation. There's actually a nevuah, there's a prophecy where Hashem showed a prophecy to Zechariah Hanavi, and he showed him a menorah. And we know whenever they see an image of something in a prophecy, the image is a message. It represents something. So the menorah represents the Jewish people. And why 7 branches? Because all the Jewish people, in some ways, are divided into 7 categories. There's those that serve Hashem with chesed, those that serve Hashem with gevura, those that serve Hashem with tiferes, and so on. And what was Aaron's avodah was? His avodah was lahamshe b'chinas chochma b'midas. In other words, Aaron was the level of chochma, and the menorah is the 7 attributes. His avodah was to be mamshech, to draw down from his attribute, which is chochma, into the midas, b'chinas bittul. So this is what we said before, that intellect has in it a certain way bittul, because intellect is not about me. Pure intellect is just academically understanding something. Midas is all about me, how I feel, how it's affecting me. I think that that's in fact the reason why even in English it's called emotion. It means that this puts me into motion. It moves me one way or another. And therefore, Aaron, who represented the level of Chokhmah, there's no yeshus. Chokhmah is more bittul. And as a result of that, it brings bittul into the midos. So in other words, when Aaron lit the menorah, this was giving spiritual hashpah, spiritual power to all the Yidden in the world. When he lit one candle, all the Yidden were connected to chesed. When he lit the second candle, this brought hashpah to all the Yidden related to gevurah. And what was he doing? In fact, oil, shemen, always represents chokhmah. And when he lit the oil in the menorah, that's what he was doing. The inyan is that bittul mitzad oir ha'elyon. Bittul has to come from something that's higher than self. As long as it's about me and self, there's a sense of yeshus there. There's an awareness of self, which can get in the way. So bittul has to come from something which is a higher light than self. That when a person meditates on the greatness of Hashem, and how Hashem is exalted, and how Hashem is infinite, so this causes a godly light to be shining. He feels godliness. And this light, being that he's feeling godliness, the more he feels godliness, the less he feels self. And therefore, when he feels godliness, it takes away that sense of yeshus, and he feels more bittul. But in order for this to happen, the person who's davening has to prepare himself for that. Which means if a person prepares himself before he meditates in davening, that my purpose in davening is I want to feel the godly light, and that's what I want to focus on, that'll help, that nispol b'nafshay, that's going to make him excited with simcha and dveikus and love for Hashem. So there has to be sort of a conscious preparation that I want to focus on that and not on chas v'sholom what I feel about myself. The hachara is that I prepare myself that I should be focusing on the light of Hashem, the godliness that I feel, not what it does to me, that I feel the godliness, and therefore in some way it raises my bar spiritually. I'm on a higher level because I feel, but it's all about the godly light. Even when he feels the pleasure and the delight in understanding godliness, and even when he becomes excited with feelings of simcha and love, but as b'chinas bittul v'anochas atzmusei, if he prepares himself the proper way, then he'll be experiencing these godly feelings, and it won't be about self. Again, this is all on a very, very subtle level, but from this we can learn how it applies to all of us, just to be aware that even if I'm davening, and even if I'm learning, and even if I feel a certain pleasure in something godly, there still could be in that a feeling of yeshus, and that feeling of yeshus could get in the way and lead me to things that are inappropriate. What about the other person? The other person is davening, and we said before, he's davening and meditating in a way that it humbles him. If it humbles him, then surely he doesn't feel yeshus. So he's now going to explain, even when you're experiencing humility, it could also be yeshus. How's that? Even the Aveda, which is an Aveda of humility, where he feels humbled by his thoughts, and he feels bitter by the fact that he's distant from Hashem. Generally speaking, this is bittul. He feels bittul. He feels humbled by Hashem's greatness, and he feels how small he is, and how his Aveda doesn't do justice to serve Hashem. Mikol Mokem actually is gam bazer b'chinas hayeshus, u'mashu murgish benafshe gam beis hamarirus v'ashifrus. Even then, when he's feeling this humility and he's feeling this bitterness, But again, what registers in his head? The thought of I feel humility and I feel bitterness. It's not really, in a sense, true bitterness. It's also about a certain sense of self. I'm going to skip the part that's the same thing, repeating it in Yiddish. Obviously, it's not affecting the person as deep as it could or as deep as it should. If it would really touch him to the core, then he would lose that sense of self at all. But if it really doesn't affect him so deeply, so even the bittul is not a complete bittul. Because we see that when something really affects a person to the point that it touches them to the core, they forget all other things. They're just totally overcome with feeling of whatever it is towards that thing that really affected them. So if there's room for me to think about self, or that the sense of self should register, that means it's not complete bittul. And the other reason is that itself can make him sort of enhance his sense of self by thinking, oh, wow, I have bittul. So it's a strange combination. On one hand, the person has bittul. On the other hand, he feels good that this is something which raises my bar, raises my status. I'm somebody who has bittul, which means, again, that the bittul is not complete. Again, hagam shezo be'elam b'nafshay. Sometimes this is subconscious, doesn't even feel it. What I'm just describing, the Rebbe is saying, could be subconscious. It's just a sign that his avodah is not 100% complete. There's still a sense of yeshus, whether it's conscious or subconscious. And this could undermine his avodah. That it could be that even though he's davening, but it's still not accomplishing what it's really supposed to accomplish, that the person should have refined midas. And that his davening and learning and mitzvah should be the way it's supposed to be. Not that he doesn't do it, but it's not on the way and the level it's supposed to be. This explains what we said before. That even though this person is committed to divine service, and we explained divine service means not just Torah mitzvahs, it means refining my personality, refining myself internally. Even though he's doing that, nevertheless, being that he's lacking in the sense of bittul, but his avodah, even though he's doing the avodah, but there's a certain sense of yeshus, of pleasure that it gives me, and it enhances my sense of my ego. That could lead that he cannot tolerate the other person. In fact, the other person has also reached a certain spiritual level in his avodah, which means his davening and his working on himself in a way that he is above the ordinary person that you see coming to shul. Nevertheless, so that means that person is like me. If that person is like me, then my accomplishments are not so amazing. They're not so exceptional. But that person has also done the same thing I did. So it takes away from my sense of yeshus. And that's why he hates him. In fact, he tries to exaggerate and publicly expose how the other person is not okay. He degrades his avodah. He waves it away. He dismisses it like what he's doing is really nothing, and his davening is nothing, and so on. Why? So therefore, people wouldn't compare that person to him. But not only that, he shouldn't be compared, he certainly shouldn't be higher than him. which means a gam. So in other words, it's possible to be doing all these things and yet, nevertheless, have a midah, which is really a negative character trait. But in my mind, I don't think that it's negative. I think the reason why I'm putting this person down because he really deserves to be put down, because his davening is not okay and his learning is not okay, and the way he understands Chassidus is wrong, and so on and so forth. Really, it could be coming from that yeshus, that I can't tolerate that that person should be recognized as someone of prominence, because that takes away from me. So even if it doesn't affect him at all, even if it doesn't affect him that people will think this or people will think that, just because of Yeshus, he can't tolerate when another person has qualities. And therefore he hates him, and he will degrade him. He can't speak with him peacefully, and certainly the Schabrei can't become close friends with him. This is even more relevant when a person sees in the other person something really exceptional, a superior quality. Either he sees that he's exceptional academically in his understanding, or he sees that he's exceptional in his vigilance of not doing an avera, or exceptional in his purity. Will get angry, will become furious, and he will put it down. He just can't handle it. This is also envy. There's a pasuk that says envy is as difficult and as cruel as the grave. In other words, envy is a very, very destructive emotion. It's also connected to baseless hate, because he didn't do anything bad to him. He's not taking anything away from him. He's doing his thing. And if he's doing something good, you can also do something good. So why do you feel this envy? He can do just the same good thing that he's doing. And nobody's stopping him. And the only reason why you can't stand that person is just you're envious and jealous because that person is superior to you. Or if we're not talking about envy for ruchnizik accomplishments, it could be for gashmizik accomplishments. The person is very successful at what he does. Person is successful making a lot of money, and he has wealth. Again, he didn't take my money, so what are you so upset about? He's just upset to see that that person is successful versus me. It's Hashem's bracha that makes a person successful. Kidua, and it's known. Sinna machmas kinna, hate that comes and is born out of envy, ein la takana, there's no way to correct it. In other words, when I hate a person because they're doing something wrong, so we can talk about it and say, stop doing this thing to hurt me. They stop doing the thing to hurt me, and I stop hating them. So if you have two people that are having a fight about something, I took something away from this other person, the other person took something away from me, you have a mediator, work it out, and see that everyone gets what they deserve, what belongs to them, and everything stops. If somebody is doing something else that's hurting me, we can work on that. But what if the hate comes and is born out of envy? There's nothing to work on. What should I work on? I should become non-existent. I should stop doing good things. I should stop doing things that are achieving and accomplishing. So therefore, hate that comes from kinna, from envy, is something which is irreparable. And that is basically similar and more or less the same thing as sin and schema, baseless hate. They're both based on Yeshus. Yeshus b'aveda, b'simcha. This is the summary on page 116. that there could be yeshus when a person serves Hashem with simcha, there can be yeshus when a person serves Hashem with shiflus, and yeshus is something which causes hate and envy, and that's basically what the whole mimer is talking about. That's basically the whole mimer. So again, I think the main message, the main thing that this part of the mimer is teaching us is that even if I'm not aware why, what's motivating me, what's the driving force to put this person down and to see the thing they do in a bad way, I have to be aware after learning this mimer that it could be, if I think into it, I might find that the feelings that are motivating me are actually yeshus. And even if I don't feel it, it's very possible that this is nevertheless subconsciously motivating me. And therefore what? Therefore, I have to stop doing that because I'm telling myself that I'm putting this person down because they're really doing something wrong, or because whatever they're doing is worthless, and it's not really true. It's just me exaggerating the situation in order to accommodate my yeshus. I remember seeing a letter from the Rebbe, this was in the earlier years, where someone writes to the Rebbe that he feels very alone and isolated. He doesn't have anybody to sort of be together with and socialize. The Rebbe says there are people in your community. And he writes that the people in the community are not in his caliber and not in his level, and he doesn't see how he can get together with them. And the Rebbe's answer is more, I mean, not as sharp and as harsh as it says over here, but the Rebbe was telling him that everybody has something to offer, everybody has something to contribute. I guess if you focus on the good in the other person, then you'll find a way that you can connect. If you focus on the things that you look at it with a negative eye, then you'll feel that you can't connect. So, and not only that, but here he says that even the fact that you see it with negative eye, sometimes it is really negative, and the problem is that I shouldn't focus on it. Here it comes out, it's not even so negative in the first place. It's an exaggerated negativity. I'm magnifying it, I'm exaggerating it, because that'll serve it, that'll suit my yeshus. That makes me feel better. But then now he goes into another thing in the next chapter, and that is how can we find that actually there are places in Torah where it promotes envy and jealousy as something positive. That's the next piece. Let's move on. I guess we'll do the review after we finish that. Vagam, page 117, we do find there is a Maila, there's an advantage in kina, which is jealousy, in a spiritual sense. As it says, kina seifrim tar b'chochma. Envy among scribes, which means scholars, will lead to more knowledge. It'll increase more knowledge. So there's a pasuk in Chumash which says Rachel, who was a tzaddikus, in a complete tzaddikus, was envious of her sister, who was also a tzaddikus. But so the Chazal say, what does it mean she was envious? She was envious because she had children and she didn't have children. No, she wasn't envious about that. But Kanata Maseh Tevim, she was envious of her good deeds. But what's the difference? It was saying now that being envious of someone, being jealous of someone is about yeshus. And what is the first thing? The first thing is actually in reference to a certain halacha. That generally speaking, there's a halacha that you're not allowed to be masig gvul. Masig gvul means you can't take away parnasa from another person. So if a person has a certain business in an area, and you set up a business in the same area, and by doing that, you're taking away from the other person, I mean, there are a lot of halachas, when it applies, how it applies, where it applies. So what I'm just saying now is very general, but in certain situations, that's called undermining the other person's parnasa. You know how to do it. So there's halachas. You have to be X amount of distance away, or some situations it is okay, but generally speaking, you're not allowed to do something which will undermine someone else's income. When it comes to teaching children, it was years ago, it wasn't necessarily a big school, but each a malamed, a teacher, took kids to his house, and he would teach them. So could I set up a class for children that's not, it's in the same area where someone else set up a class for children? So the halach is when it comes to teaching children, there's no issue with Hasaga's law, with setting up another one. Why? Because if I'm going to set one up and the other one sets one up, and I have children, he has children, and basically each one is going to want to show that they're a better teacher. What's going to be the end result? That the kids are going to get the best kind of schooling, because each teacher is going to do their best to outdo the other. Kina Seifrim, which means envy amongst scribes, or I think it's also translated as teachers of Torah, will increase knowledge. So the kids will benefit. That's a good thing. But still, it's still a negative character trait. So he's going to explain how it could also be a positive character trait. Why? And in fact, there's a pasuk. The pasuk says, "Al yikana libcha b'chatoyim." Your heart should not envy people that are sinners. In other words, you look at people that do averis, and they have more fun, or they have more entertainment, or they have more money, or they have more power. So don't be envious of that. That we can understand. But then he says, "Ki im b'yiras Hashem." Be envious of people that fear Hashem. Why envy? You can say admire it, look up to it, but the word envy should have a negative connotation to it. That'll make you, when you're envious of someone, we just finished saying, then you don't like them, you want to put them down. This is means when you see a certain quality in another person, and the quality is either chokmah, their knowledge of Torah, or the quality is their good character traits, and you're envious of that. In other words, you admire these qualities. You admire refinement, you admire kindness, you admire people that are caring and people that are compassionate, you admire people that have knowledge of Torah. And now I see this person has these qualities, so therefore I'm envious of this person. Why? Page 118. That feeling of envy drives me to make an effort to be like that person. But what do I need envy for? What do I need the feeling of jealousy for, which could lead to negativity? So he explains there's something deeper about it. Hainu. This feeling of envy reaches into a very deep part of the soul. Which explains why we have competition amongst children, students, competing with each other. What's the competing opinion? Why is it a positive thing? So he says here that this is basically the same idea that we speak about in general, about tests, about the Messiah and the challenge, that we had this before, that every person has two levels in their potential. One is called koiches hagluyim, revealed koiches, revealed powers, and the other is koiches analomim, hidden powers, which means, for example, when a person sees how much they could lift, weights. Every person has what they could naturally lift. You lift 5 pounds, this person could lift 10 pounds, this person could lift 20 pounds. When there's chas v'shalom, a danger, and the person is running for their life, and that's when adrenaline is released, that person ends up lifting 40 pounds to save his life and run out somewhere. So this koyach, to lift 40 pounds, was it just created, or they always had it in potential? Of course, they always had it in potential. But in ordinary circumstances, that doesn't come out. That doesn't surface. That only surfaces when I feel threatened, and that causes the adrenaline to be released, and the person can do things that they normally would never believe that they can do. And of course, this doesn't only apply to physical kayak, it all applies to or the kayachas of the nefesh, like the intellect and the emotion, that when chas v'shalom, something is going on that's challenging, like, when you think again of people that are being held hostage, these are people that family members always love them. But there's no question that the feeling of love and the feeling of attachment and the yearning and craving to see them, there's no way could be matched to what they felt in ordinary circumstances. Why? Because when chas v'shalom something happens like that, it brings out that something much deeper. That love is always there, but that deeper love doesn't normally surface. In fact, this is the reason explained in Chassidus why Hashem gives us challenges. Something happens which seems to not allow me to get close to Him. Something happens which seems to interfere with my relationship with Him, and I have to overcome it. And because I'm being challenged, I'm being threatened, therefore it brings out something deeper in me, which ordinarily I wouldn't be able to bring that out. So the reason why Hashem gives me the challenge is to enable me to bring out a deeper potential of myself. And the same thing intellectually, the famous Maimer Chazal, that I learned a lot from my teachers, I learned even more from my colleagues, but the most that I've gained in wisdom was from my students. That because the students challenge the teacher with questions that force the teacher's brain to come up with things that ordinarily would never come up. So therefore, when it says that we're jealous of someone, which means I see someone who has more than me, and I want to get to that place, that challenge brings out in the person, it allows deeper potential to come out, and therefore they'll be able to achieve even more. And that's why it's a positive thing. But it's not about yeshus. Of course, there's a subtle, thin line, but by someone like Rachel, Imenu, or the other examples, what's really motivating them is not, I want my name to be greater, or I want to have a position or honor or anything else, but it's about, I want the quality of learning or the quality of midas, and being that I see that person has it, I don't, that makes me want to have it more, and that will stimulate deeper potential within me to come out. As we'll see later, this is called Chayzer. This is a very, very common, basic term of Chassidus, Chayzer and Yasha. We'll explain it tomorrow in the session. Okay. Yeah.
So if you have a jealousy of someone else's positive traits, and that makes you like act more positively or listen more positive, so is it because it's in you already and it's like a hidden payoff, or is it's not a reflection of like, oh, they're doing this, I'm gonna do it too, and it's like more superficial because they're just trying to, like, they're influenced by that? Is it, did you always have that power?
I guess we can see what the end result is. If the end result in any way is that I feel some sort of resentment to that person, or I don't like that person, or I find myself finding fault in that person, then I know it's coming from the wrong place. But if I see that all it does is motivates me to do more, then obviously it's coming from the right place.
Let's say the doing more part, like it's coming from because someone else is doing that, in reaction to something else. So is it coming from a true place, like you always have a cut out within you, and that's pulling it out, or you're just doing it because they're doing it, like copying their good deeds, or trying to be more like their good deeds, learning something more, like being more careful on something?
So I think if that would be the case, then I probably would also manifest in something else that's a little bit more negative, which is putting the other person down. If it doesn't, then it means it's coming from a good place. But I'm just striving to achieve these qualities, and seeing in that person makes me work harder to want to get it.
When you feel jealousy, it's like not really jealous of the person, you're jealous of like the quality.
Right.
They will still come, you can still take it their own, like if they're Yeshiv, they'll take it their own way, like jealous of their, and how they learn. And if it's taken the wrong way, then it can still be like putting them down.
So I think when we have this feeling, it's very hard to recognize where it really is coming from. So the only way to recognize it, I take a look to see what it's leading to. If I see that it leads me to, like he says here, put the other person down, find fault in what they're doing, dismiss what they're doing, or someone says, wow, the guy's so great, and you say, nah, they do this and this. And that's what's happening, then I know it's coming from the wrong place. But if I don't see that happening to me, all I see happening to me is being motivated to try to do whatever they're doing. That means that it's jealousy coming from a good place. And if it does happen to me, I should work on not letting me go in that direction. Just use the feeling of jealousy and try to guide it to make me work more rather than to think about what's going on with the other person. In other words, what if I do feel those feelings? Should I stop being motivated or not? If I find that it's motivating me, I should. But I should. I think recognizing an awareness where it's coming from is the key. So I know that when I see something negative in the other person, I know it's just my nefesh habahamis driving me crazy. Is that real?